Imagine hiding in a hole for 12 years, surviving on rat blood, only to be sliced in half the moment a holy knight finds you. That was Eugene's pathetic life, a rare vampire who was too weak to fight and too scared to live, but death wasn't the end. He wakes up back in the past with a single realization. In this world, the weak are just food for the strong, so he stops running. He hunts down the Swamp Lord, rips out its heart, and devours the magic stone, gaining impenetrable black armor. But his greatest weapon isn't his strength, it's his lie. He walks straight into human society, puts on a fancy coat, and cons the entire kingdom into believing that the SS-rank vampire lord is actually their genius human knight. The sky roared as torrential rain poured down without mercy. An army of armored knights stood amidst the storm when one of them drove his sword through a vampire's body, lifting him into the air. The knights spoke coldly, saying that tricking the church's knights had been an impressive feat, but his role ended here. He withdrew his blade, condemning the vampire for the sin of deception against the church and for failing to accept the holy knight's judgment. The knight then asked if the vampire knew why he had not been captured all this time. It was because he was a rare vampire, one who had appeared after a long absence. Capturing him slowly was necessary so that the knight's achievement would stand out. Hearing this, the vampire grit his teeth and leapt forward to attack, convinced that this world was nothing but a jungle where the strong preyed upon the weak, where everything was decided by overwhelming power. That twisted belief met its end when the knight sliced him cleanly in half. The knight glared down at the corpse, declaring that the vampire's very existence insulted the church and defamed its sacred prestige. Suddenly, the vampire awoke, gasping for breath. He looked down at his body and found it completely intact. Confused, he scanned his surroundings and realized he had been reincarnated into the past. This was a secluded forest near Broadbone Village, untouched by human presence. He had once lived here, hiding from human eyes because he was weak. His name is Eugene. He had never originally craved blood, but being led astray by instinct had become the root of his downfall. The next day, mercenaries swarmed the area. 5 days later, holy knights began patrolling the entire village. No matter how carefully he hid or how much time passed, they always found him. Out of sheer terror, Eugene survived by drinking only the blood of beasts in the forest for a grueling 12 years. Now, as he ran deeper into the forest, he thought about how he did not know why he had returned to the past. But since he had been given this chance, he could not afford to repeat his previous mistakes. If he was destined to die even while holding his breath and clinging to life, then there was only one path forward to become strong enough that no one could kill him. From that moment on, Eugene changed his survival strategy. Vampires could absorb power by sucking blood. The stronger the owner of the blood, the greater the power gained. Standing before a vast swamp, Eugene felt a looming presence as a beast suddenly emerged. It lunged at him, but he narrowly evaded the attack. With his low-grade body, evasion was all he could manage. But if he could inflict even the slightest wound, he could drink its blood. Until now, his method of survival had been to erase his presence entirely. But since that approach had failed, there was no reason to hesitate any longer. At this moment, he needed power more desperately than anyone. He struck at the beast, but its hardened body shattered his sword. The beast retaliated, slamming him aside and leaving him grievously injured. This creature was known as a roamer. Some creatures possessed magic stones even in environments devoid of magic power, and such stones were often considered rarer than gems. For these creatures, the magic stone served as their nucleus. If Eugene could obtain one, he might be able to change the situation, but the gap in power between them was overwhelming. The beast attacked again. Eugene barely dodged, realizing that the master of this forest could snuff out his life before he could even land a meaningful blow. Suddenly, the beast clamped its jaws around him and dragged him beneath the murky water. As darkness closed in, Eugene thought that it wouldn't have been strange if fate had simply ended him here again. But he refused to lose hope. He bit down hard on the beast's tongue and began sucking its blood. The beast roared in agony as Eugene's body started to transform. He plunged deeper into the creature's body, forcing his way toward its core. There, he found the magic stone. Grabbing it with all his strength, he crushed it. Moments later, Eugene emerged from the swamp, water cascading from his body. His eyes burned with resolve as he declared that if he was given another chance, he would choose the path of fighting, not running away. From this moment onward, he would seize blood, power, and victory with his own hands. Eugene looked down at his body, realizing that he had not only absorbed the beast's blood, but had also consumed the magic stone itself. The mana contained within it was far stronger than he had anticipated. Its color was unlike any he had seen before, and its size was overwhelmingly large. The ability he gained from the stone allowed him to armor his skin with black scales. He had learned by the forest's master long ago, back when he had been captured by mercenaries. At that time, the marshlands had been much smaller, so no one knew of the master's existence. However, after the rainy season, when floods expanded the marsh and widened its territory, the creature revealed itself by attacking the mercenaries. Amid that chaos, Eugene had tasted the wounded beast's blood, and thanks to that strength, he had managed to kill several mercenaries and escape. Knowing the effect of that blood, he had resolved that no matter what, he would drink it again someday. Looking at his body now, Eugene acknowledged that he had gained some strength, but it was nowhere near enough to face Holy Knight Jung Dorit. Until he was absolutely certain, he needed to avoid any fight he could not win. Jung Dorit, the Holy Knight, someone who could find him no matter where he hid. That meant he possessed an exceptional ability to sense monsters and undead. Hiding any longer was pointless. Instead, Eugene had to build enough strength to stand against the paladins who would inevitably come for him. He looked up at the sky and thought that it was too early to test the magic stone's power. He should return before sunrise. Just then, a presence manifested. A voice declared that the false master who had stolen its territory and turned its beautiful lake into a swamp was dead. To think Eugene had delivered such a gruesome end to that false ruler, it offered its thanks. However, barging into this land without fear and staining it with blood were grave sins that must be paid for. Eugene stiffened in surprise as a creature appeared, declaring that this was the territory protected by the great Mirian. The forest would reek, the earth would roar, and his body would suffer a curse that would tear him apart. A small fairy suddenly appeared before him, muttering that there was no way this bald vampire could hear a single word she was saying. Only certain special beings could sense a spirit's presence. Then what is it? Eugene asked. The fairy froze in shock, blurting out that there was no way. When Eugene questioned her again, the spirit hesitantly asked if he could see her, calling him one of the Night Clan. Eugene nodded. She then asked if he had heard everything she said earlier. After a brief pause, the spirit introduced herself as Mirian. She explained that she had once been the true master of this place, that 15 years ago, a crocodile had stolen her home and turned her into its slave. As Mirian spoke, Eugene noticed that one of the tattoos on his body was fading away. Mirian questioned him about it, but Eugene admitted that he did not know the reason. The tattoos had been there for as long as he could remember. From the moment of his earliest memories, he had always been a vampire born that way. Even at the edge of those memories, all 10 tattoos had already been engraved on his body. Yet, for some reason, he could not recall anything from further back. He had been too focused on surviving quietly to ever reflect on himself. If these tattoos were some kind of seal or spell, then perhaps one of them had broken because of what happened today. He turned to leave, but Mirian asked if he was going already. She said she was lonely. Did he know how wonderful it was to finally have someone to talk to? Eugene asked if she was not planning to turn the swamp back into a lake. She responded by asking if he knew how long purification took. Then she added teasingly that instead of serving a swamp, wouldn't it be better to serve fresh water to a pale, handsome man like him? As a water spirit, she took great pride in how delicious her water tasted. Eugene walked away, but Mirian told him to wait, saying she could purify any water instantly so he could drink anything safely. He told her he did not need it. A few days later, in Broadwind Village, a man burst through a door shouting for the chief to come quickly. The red-eyed monster was here. Outside the village lay numerous animal corpses. A villager asked the chief what he thought the red-eyed monster was planning, as he usually only left game once every full moon. The chief replied that it was not time yet. The red-eyed monster was a strange man who lived in the mountains away from the village. He had lived near Broadwind Village for over 10 years without harming anyone. Instead, he would visit late at night every full moon to share the animals he hunted. When he first appeared, the villagers had been terrified, but when he consistently brought game as if paying tribute, their fear gradually faded. Thus, for over a decade, their strange relationship endured. Eugene asked the villagers if it would be all right for him to step into the village for a while. The chief remarked that it had been a long time and asked if Eugene had something to say. Eugene then removed his disguise, explaining that the reason he had lived far from the village was because he had been sick. After many years of seclusion, he was finally cured and had come to share the good news. He said he had received much help from the village and wished to repay their kindness. Should anything ever happen to the village, they were free to call upon him. The villagers stared in shock, wondering if he had always been as beautiful and handsome. Later, Mirian questioned Eugene about why he had given away all the game he had worked so hard to hunt. Eugene replied that among humans, breaking the ice mattered, and showing goodwill was important. She asked why he would bother getting along with people he had no intention of eating. He admitted that he thought it would not matter, but sometimes it did. He could not ignore what was about to happen. If he did not stop it, mercenaries would soon storm the village and everyone would be slaughtered. He believed they planned to abduct a boy from Broadwind Village and take him to Lord T1's castle. To erase all witnesses, they would kill every villager. If this incident was not prevented, it would eventually lead to the future where paladins arrived. Miriam was shocked and wondered how he could know something like that. She had been with him for days, yet she still did not understand what lay within him. What was he really thinking? Eugene told her that whether it was true or not, they would find out if they watched. Before that, he needed to gain the villagers' trust so they would see him as harmless. Suddenly, he stopped when Miriam asked what was wrong. A group of mercenaries emerged before them. The leader scoffed, asking what was with that guy, saying it looked like he had come from the village. Another mercenary remarked that Eugene was alone and poorly equipped. The leader ordered them to make sure no screams were heard as one of the mercenaries rushed forward to attack. In a single motion, Eugene sliced the man's head off. Shock rippled through the group. Eugene calmly told Miriam that he needed to build trust so he would not appear suspicious. Then, as his body began to transform, he declared that he was going to kill every last one of the mercenaries. The mercenaries recoiled in fear, shouting that he was a vampire. One of them suddenly barked to the others not to panic, declaring that this actually worked in their favor. If they handed him over to the church alive, the reward would be enormous. He charged at Eugene without hesitation, but Eugene killed him instantly, not giving him even the slightest chance to react. The mercenaries continued to rush him in desperation, but Eugene began cutting them down one after another as if they were nothing more than wild beasts. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, Eugene muttered that this was the perfect time to spill blood. Later that night, the villagers discovered the corpses of the mercenaries. The chief turned to Eugene and asked if this could be the work of the red-eyed monster. Eugene calmly denied it, explaining that he had found the bodies while returning from a hunt. He said he had been checking his traps when he came across them. These men had been heading toward the village when they were attacked and the culprits were lying right there. Several black wolves lay dead among the corpses. Eugene explained that there had been too many wolves, and they had taken advantage of the situation by feeding on the bodies. The villagers could tell that Eugene had killed a few, but there had originally been more mercenaries. The ones who escaped might still be watching from somewhere nearby. The chief remarked that black wolves were notorious in the area, but questioned how Eugene could have handled them alone. One of the villagers suddenly pointed out that there were wolf claw marks on the bodies. They had been torn apart by wolves. The chief frowned, noting that while black wolves were aggressive, they would not recklessly attack such a large group of mercenaries. He then apologized to Eugene for suspecting him. Eugene replied that it was only natural. Miriam listened silently, thinking that every word Eugene spoke was a lie. The wolves had only appeared because the mercenaries' blood had drawn them in. Eugene had even left bite marks on the corpses to disguise the traces. Concealment was one thing, but why did he care so much about appearances? If they had simply left immediately, none of this trouble would have been necessary. Eugene then took out a letter and handed it to the chief, explaining that he had checked the mercenaries' belongings and found it among them. He asked if the chief would like to read it. After reading the letter, the chief's expression darkened as he asked if it was true. He turned to the villagers and asked whether Felid was currently in the village. They confirmed that he was. The chief then revealed that Felid might be Lord Timwan's illegitimate son. These mercenaries had come to retrieve him. The villagers gasped in shock, wondering if that quiet boy was actually a noble. Sometime earlier, the leader of the mercenary group had stared at Eugene in disbelief, demanding to know how he had killed so many men. He shouted that if they returned empty-handed, they would be dead anyway, so they should fight without hesitation. The mercenaries surrounded Eugene as the leader rushed forward. In an instant, Eugene struck him, sending him flying backward into a tree with a sickening impact. Eugene walked toward him slowly. The leader coughed and asked why Eugene had targeted them. From the beginning, it felt like he had been waiting. They were only heading to the village beyond the mountain, so why interfere? Eugene glared down at him and said he was curious. Why were they going to that village? That village belonged to him. The leader hurriedly apologized, claiming he did not know the village was under the rule of a vampire. He explained that there was a hidden son of the T1 family ruling the territory. He had thought the boy was missing, unaware that he had been living in secrecy. Eugene coldly accused him of lying and asked for the real reason. Had they not planned to wipe out the entire village? The leader panicked and explained that they were not hired by the head of the T1 family. Their clients were Lord Kamara and Lord Berto, heirs of the family. It was likely a political dispute among nobles. They had only been hired to capture the illegitimate son. The reason they had brought so many men was to prepare for any unforeseen trouble. He begged for forgiveness. Hearing the name Bertzel, Eugene clenched his teeth. Bertzel T1, the head of the vampire pursuit force, the knight who had hunted him alongside Jung. As a knight, Bertzel likely had not directly ordered mercenaries to massacre villagers, but it was the mercenaries' greed that led to it. Still, that greed had resulted in Eugene being discovered by the paladins. With an entire village wiped out, a large force had been mobilized to search for the culprits, turning it into the perfect excuse for a swift capture. Eugene turned away, saying he understood, and told the leader to be careful of wolves on the way back. The leader stared at him in disbelief and asked if he was truly letting him live. Eugene beheaded him. Miriam asked why he killed them even after they had confessed. Eugene replied that he could not let them live after discovering he was a vampire. Besides, the wolves drawn by the scent of blood were already salivating. Back in the village, the villagers asked the chief if it was true. The chief confirmed that the mercenaries had been guards sent to take Felid to the castle. One villager added that Felid had lost his mother the previous year and lived alone. He must have come to the village 8 years ago. The mercenaries sent to retrieve him had been taken by beasts, so what should they do now? Eugene then asked the chief whether he intended to escort Felid to the lord's castle. The chief agreed. Eugene said the mercenaries could not handle the local beasts, but he, having lived in the forest for a long time, could guide them safely to the city. The chief hesitated, saying he could not ask such a thing of Eugene. Eugene replied that it was fine. As a knight, he could not turn a blind eye. Miriam muttered that he was shameless, but hearing that word, the villagers were stunned. Eugene then apologized for the late introduction, stating calmly that his name was Yan Eugene, of the Eugene family. Hearing his name and title, the villagers were stunned and immediately began treating Eugene with deep respect. Miriam muttered that even for a lie, this had gone far too far. But Eugene replied, as she had seen their reaction earlier, these people had never seen a noble in their lives. The entire village was already in an uproar over the revelation that a boy hiding in the mountains was of noble blood. They lacked the ability to distinguish whether he was truly a noble or merely impersonating one. The villagers asked if he was really a knight. Why had he been hiding in the forest for over 10 years? Was it some form of secret training? Eugene replied that he had his reasons for cutting ties with the world and choosing to live in isolation. Next morning, Eugene stood by the window gazing outside. He looked down at his hand, thinking about the skin-hardening ability he had gained from the forest's lord. Covering his body in black scales seemed to block the sunlight to some extent. It would make the journey ahead far less troublesome. Miriam suddenly asked what he had been thinking when he told such an outrageous lie. He claimed to be a knight, yet he could not even read. Eugene replied that he might be exposed one day. But since he was leaving anyway, it did not matter. Miriam then asked what his goal truly was. He had lived quietly in the forest until now, so why suddenly befriend humans and take on their requests? Just then, a villager informed Eugene that they could depart whenever he was ready. Eugene remarked that he had gained status overnight. Humans trusted authority more than clumsy explanations. He could lie endlessly, but if he lied with status, he could reduce 100 lies down to 10. This village was the only place where such a lie would be accepted at face value. Nobles elsewhere would not be so easily deceived, so from now on, he would turn this lie into the truth. The chief handed Eugene a letter explaining that it was written in case any misunderstandings arose along the way. He asked him to take good care of the young master. Felid introduced himself politely, saying he looked forward to Eugene's guidance. As they spoke, Eugene thought that he had wrapped his lie in truth, using his skills, and now everyone believed him. To make these lies real, he would need genuine status. As they departed, Eugene introduced himself to Felid, thinking that by using him, he would eventually become a true noble. During their journey, Eugene pointed ahead and asked if that village was called Brahms. Felid confirmed it after reading the sign. Eugene asked if Felid could read. Felid nodded, saying his late mother had taught him. She had been of low status and never received a formal education, but she once said the man she loved had taught her. Felid had never imagined that man was actually a lord. Eugene then asked if Felid could teach him to read as well. Felid was startled, saying that Eugene was a knight, surely he could read. Eugene replied that being a knight was merely a title. His family had already fallen, so there was nothing to boast about. What had kept him alive until now was not words, but a single sword. Felid looked at him with pity. Eugene thought that doubt and belief were intertwined. Once trust was earned, it became thick enough to cover any lie. When Eugene glanced at Felid again, he saw it clearly in his eyes. Felid already believed him. Felid apologized, admitting that he had doubted Eugene at first. One moment he was a monster, the next a noble. It was confusing. He realized he had held prejudice because the village had called him a monster. He decided he would rely on his own eyes rather than rumors. If Eugene truly came from a martial family, then it was possible he had neglected his studies. Felid promised that Eugene would not be embarrassed in front of others. He would teach him whenever they had spare time. Suddenly, Eugene sensed something and stepped forward, stopping an arrow just before it struck Felid. Bandits emerged from the surroundings. Felid froze in fear as they demanded that the travelers drop all their cargo and everything in their pockets. If they did not move quickly, they would be killed. Eugene calmly drew his sword and beheaded one of the bandits, shocking the rest. He remarked that he had moved exactly as they wanted, snappy. The remaining bandits roared in anger and charged, but Eugene cut them down without mercy. After it was over, Eugene remarked that he truly could not understand why humans chose to kill and steal from those weaker than themselves. Was it acceptable to torment someone simply because they appeared weak? He then asked Felid whether learning to read would help him understand such things. Felid felt nauseous as he looked at the blood-soaked scene. Eugene reminded him that he had said he would confirm things with his own eyes. Felid was free to believe whatever he wished, but Eugene would not allow a single drop of blood to touch him. Afterward, inside the city, the market bustled with life. People crowded every street, voices overlapping in a constant roar of commerce. Looking at the sea of humanity, Miriam said excitedly that this was so much fun. As Felid walked beside Eugene, he warned him to be careful if he planned to shop here. Felid explained that he had only visited this market a few times with the village chief, but the merchants were ruthless. If Eugene was not careful, they would rip him off. Even the chief was always stripped clean whenever he came. Eugene thought that before he could be careful, he first needed money when something caught his eye. He approached a shopkeeper and asked how much he would pay for some leather he wanted to sell. The shopkeeper examined it and said it was black wolf hide, rare in this region, and there was quite a lot of it. He looked Eugene over and decided he was not a merchant, just a traveler, an easy target to scam. With a practiced sigh, he claimed the hides were badly damaged and barely usable. At most, he would offer 18 silver coins. Eugene glared at him. The shopkeeper stiffened and nervously laughed, saying he supposed he could pay a little more. Eugene's gaze did not waver. Sweat formed on the shopkeeper's brow as he raised the price again. 23 silver coins. Eugene continued staring in silence. Finally, trembling, the shopkeeper blurted out that 30 silver coins were the best he could do. Eugene accepted. Later that night, Eugene reflected that he must have looked like a complete pushover. He had learned the basics from Felid, but he still could not read very well. He was now wearing proper clothes, and when Miriam looked at him, she commented that vampires were supposed to wear silk, but this was good enough. Eugene said the market had been far nicer than he had expected. As they talked, Miriam remarked that vampires were the kings of nobility, living in massive castles beneath moonlight, dressed in silk, surrounded by servants, drinking fresh blood like fine wine. Eugene replied that for someone who lived in swamps, she certainly knew a lot. Miriam explained that she'd once lived in the spirit world. Sometimes successful seniors from the human world would visit, and they taught the spirits many useful things. While Eugene was talking with her, Felid arrived and asked who he had been speaking to. Eugene replied that he had simply been talking to himself and asked if Felid was feeling all right. Felid apologized, saying that cutting up the rabbit had reminded him of what happened that morning. He told Eugene not to worry. He still had plenty of energy, and the night was long. He could teach him as much as he wanted. After a while, Eugene asked if reading was really supposed to be this easy. Felid shook his head, saying it was only easy because Eugene was amazing. Even Felid had taken months to learn everything, and he had been considered fast. Later, Eugene asked Felid if things would truly be okay once they arrived. Simply knowing he would become part of that bloodline might not be enough. It felt like becoming a noble overnight. Felid admitted he did not know. His mother had never told him the details, and he had never thought deeply about it before. It still did not feel real, and he was not even expecting Lord T1 to welcome him. Just then, a man waved at them and said they could not find a good place to camp, so he hoped they would not mind if he asked something. Eugene examined him carefully, real weapons, real armor, even a large shield. Proper mercenaries. The man asked where they were headed. Eugene replied that they were traveling to Lord T1's castle. The man smiled and said they were headed there as well, asking if they could share a campfire. They would share their wine, water, and mutton. A younger boy suddenly called out to him, addressing him as Captain Partik, saying he did not have to go that far. Eugene remained silent as Partik apologized, explaining that Laban had only just joined the group and did not yet know when to keep quiet. Partik introduced himself, and Eugene did the same. Upon hearing Eugene's name, Laban scoffed and asked Partik if he truly believed him. Did he look like a knight? He had no horse and no armor. Laban poked at him further, saying he had never heard of that family and accusing him of faking it. Eugene glared at him, thinking that he had already told Felid he was a knight. He could not change his story now. These mercenaries had approached them for some other reason. Whether he was truly a knight or not likely did not matter to them. But if they continued pushing, the situation would change. There were not many of them. He could kill them all. Just as Eugene was thinking, Partik suddenly called out Laban's name and struck him hard across the face. Laban was sent flying backward, crashing into a tree. Partik immediately turned to Eugene and apologized, asking for forgiveness for their rookie's disrespect. Eugene accepted the apology and told him to keep his men in line. As he turned away, Eugene thought that suspicion would only continue to grow from here. To avoid pointless attention, he needed to become a knight as soon as possible. After a while, Laban regained consciousness. Partik berated him harshly. calling him a brainless idiot and demanding to know how he could charge at a knight without a shred of fear. He told him to realize that he had just saved his life, that they had nearly all died because of his stupidity. Laban scoffed and asked what was so frightening about that scruffy-looking guy. Partik snapped back that judging by appearances alone proved he could not see 2 steps ahead. He asked Laban how much he thought that robe cost. It was a high-grade garment lined with lycanthrope leather, even the cheapest version sold for over 10 silver coins. On top of that, Eugene had been reading a letter, meaning he was literate. That alone proved he was no commoner. Partik continued, saying that he had nearly drawn his sword earlier. If he had, they would all be dead. If they were lucky, perhaps Partik and one other man might have survived. Laban demanded to know how he could be so certain. Partik explained that while Laban had been running his mouth without understanding his place, that knight already had his right hand inside his robe and his left foot subtly shifted backward. That was the stance of someone who knew how to adjust their balance to match their sword's path. If Laban had been even a second slower, his head would have been rolling on the ground. Partik went on to explain that knights were born into noble families and practically handed wooden swords at birth. They spent their entire lives learning how to kill. They plunged into unknown dungeons, skewered monsters without hesitation, and carved out merit by cutting down humans on the battlefield. Only those who stained their hands with that much blood were granted nobility and finally earned the title of knight. Impersonating a knight was a grave crime. If Eugene was real, that was dangerous. But if he was fake, that was even worse. Anyone brazen enough to claim the title of knight had to be insane unless they were confident enough to wager their life on their sword. The fact that Eugene revealed himself at such a young age meant he had already reached a high level. Laban asked if Eugene was stronger than him. Partik answered without hesitation that he was. Partik added that Eugene had said he was heading to the Lord's castle. He had heard rumors that a newly discovered dungeon might soon be opened there. Since they were bound for the same destination, they would inevitably see him again. Eugene overheard their conversation and realized he'd underestimated how much weight the title of knight carried. He hoped the plan would continue to work, but he needed more preparation. Compared to the ones he had slaughtered earlier, these mercenaries were competent. That made him wonder why the family had hired such trash before instead of men like these, or why they had not simply sent their own soldiers. He stood and walked toward them, saying he had heard they were also heading to the Lord's castle. Since they were bound for the same place, he asked if they would like to travel together. At Martella, Twin Territory Village, they walked through the city streets. Eugene thought that traveling with them was fortunate. Since the mercenaries believed he was a knight, he could gather useful intelligence along the way. The real problem would come after that. Just then, Miriam appeared and said she had listened in on the remaining mercenaries just as he had instructed. She reported that Lord T1's health was critically poor. He could die at any moment. A new dungeon had also been discovered in his territory. Conquering it promised immense wealth, but the T1 family lacked both the funds and manpower to open it. Miriam then asked what would happen to Felid if Lord T1 died. Would he not become an orphan again the moment he arrived? Eugene replied that it had nothing to do with him. Miriam countered that at this rate, Felid would be killed like a dog by his siblings. Eugene thought that Lord T1 likely summoned Felid simply because he wanted to see his child before he died. From this point onward, Felid's fate and his own would change one way or another. They soon arrived at Rose Castle. As the massive gates opened, Eugene thought it was far larger than he had expected. Suddenly, someone stopped them and demanded to know their business. Partik greeted him and explained that they were the mercenary group commissioned by the Pylon Merchant Guild. He asked who the man was. The man introduced himself as Kamara, the eldest son and heir of the T1 family. He asked if the cargo behind them was what they had delivered. Partik confirmed that it had arrived safely. Kamara ordered them to begin unloading, then turned his gaze to Eugene and asked who he was, and why he was not moving with the others. Eugene began to introduce himself, saying it was a pleasure to meet him. Before he could continue, a familiar voice cut in sharply. Bertel arrived, demanding to know how many times he needed to repeat himself that examining outsiders was his duty as the castle's guardian. Eugene froze. How could he ever forget that voice? It belonged to the general manager of the Vampire Pursuit Unit, the man who had first discovered him in hiding, the one who had tormented him alongside young Dorit. The second son of the T1 family and a direct knight, Bartel, demanded to know what Kamara was doing there. Kamara retorted coldly, asking whether he had to report every single thing he did to him. Anyone would think Bartel was already the successor. Bartel replied that he did not mean it that way. Just then, Eugene stepped forward and excused himself, saying that he carried a letter sent by Chief Gab of Broadwin. As Bartel reached out to take it, Eugene instead handed the letter to Kamara. Kamara read through it, his expression darkening. He muttered that it was unbelievable. The mercenaries had been wiped out by a wolf attack, and the knight who brought the child claimed the boy was an illegitimate son. Felid stepped forward, introduced himself, and greeted them politely. Kamara smiled faintly and said that so he was their new brother. They had been waiting for him. Their father missed him very much. Bartel, however, looked at Philid with open disgust and ordered someone to take the child away, have him washed and dressed properly. As Bartel turned to leave, Eugene stopped him, asking him to wait. He said he would like to discuss the reward first and requested to meet Lord Tiwan directly. Bartel glared at him and said that was impossible. Eugene pressed further, asking if he could not see him even for a brief moment. Bartel replied that Lord Tiwan's condition was extremely poor, making it difficult. He said the reward would be paid in gold coins and told Eugene to return home. Eugene calmly responded that it had been no small struggle to bring such a precious brother here. Kamara interjected, asking why it should not be possible. They needed to introduce a new brother anyway, so what was the issue with meeting him for just a moment? Bartel snapped that their father could barely remain awake for an hour. They could not allow him to meet a wanderer of unknown origin. Kamara then apologized to Eugene, saying it seemed difficult due to his brother, who was already acting as though he were the successor. He asked Eugene to return home safely. Eugene thought grimly that, just as expected, Bartel had never intended to let him meet Lord Tiwan from the beginning. At that moment, a heavily built man arrived and called out to Bartel, asking if he had been here. He said he had been looking for him for quite some time. Bartel asked what this was about. The man replied that these were mercenaries who had been looting villagers. Instead of training as ordered, they had been slacking off, so he had rounded them up. Even though they were only temporary mercenaries hired for dungeon subjugation, Bartel cut in, saying he would discipline them later, but there were many listening ears here. He suggested they go inside and talk. Party glanced at the man and quietly told Eugene that he was Sir Galfredick. Eugene asked if he knew him. Party nodded and explained that Galfredick had taken third place in the tournament held by the Evergreen family recently. He was an exceptionally promising knight, possessing terrifying strength comparable to a monster and refined technique. At the tournament arena that day, it was said he swept aside over 1,000 competitors. Eugene asked why someone like that would come to a remote place like this. Partik speculated that it was likely due to the newly discovered dungeon. Even in remote territory, a knight who succeeded in the first opening of a dungeon would gain immense fame. Opening a dungeon was notoriously difficult. Countless lives were often lost. Sir Galfredrick was likely using this place as a stepping stone to earn knighthood under a greater family. Eugene remarked that his current commission ended today and asked whether he could make a new request. In his mind, he resolved that he had to be the one to open this dungeon. Kamara stood by the window, deep in thought. Ever since their father's health had deteriorated, his brother had been blatantly positioning himself as the successor. Bringing in Sir Galfredrick and leveraging his knightly connections made it clear Bartel intended to open the dungeon himself. If he succeeded, public sentiment would immediately tilt in his favor. But what could Kamara do? He could not simply hire random nobodies at a time like this. Just then, a knock sounded at the door. A servant announced that Sir Eugene requested an audience. Kamara recalled the knight who had brought Felid earlier and ordered him to be let in. Eugene entered. Kamara assured him that he could worry less about Felid, as he was paying special attention to the boy's safety. Once their father awakened, he would surely grant Eugene a reward for safely delivering their brother. Kamara added that he had been deeply grateful when Eugene handed him the letter in front of Bartel. Thanks to that, he had been able to hold his head up with some dignity. Eugene replied that his original business had been solely with the lord of the territory, but a third party had intervened and complicated matters. Kamara asked what his business was. Did he wish to personally verify his status by meeting his father? Eugene said that was part of it, but he had come with a proposal. He requested to be included in the dungeon subjugation squad. Kamara burst out laughing, saying Eugene was far more amusing than he had expected. He had heard Eugene killed around 5 bandits on his way here. Was he hoping to raise his reputation as a knight by joining the subjugation? Kamara asked why he should humor such a request. Eugene replied calmly that it would be a proposal not unfavorable to Lord Kamara at this moment. Kamara asked what he meant. Eugene explained that, for reference, the reward for a successful dungeon opening would be 100 silver coins for himself and his mercenaries, along with only half of the byproducts excluding the magic stones. Kamara acknowledged that this was far below the average market rate. Eugene then asked whether he liked the offer or not. After all, the one pressed for time was not Eugene, but Kamara himself. Hearing the proposal, Kamara reflected that knights lived and died by honor. Judging by Eugene's attire, he appeared to be a wandering knight with no noble patron. Since he showed no greed for money, honor must be everything to him. Combined with what Kamara had heard earlier, he smirked. He knew exactly how to play this. This man was nothing like the other knights who thought only with their muscles. Kamara nodded and said very well. There was no reason to refuse such a favorable opportunity. He added that he looked forward to working together and extended his hand. Sometime earlier, Partik had told Eugene that magic stones were difficult to purify and that the processing fees were extremely high. Byproducts, however, could be sold for full price the moment they were handed over, making them far more profitable. Partik had even offered to introduce Eugene to a merchant guild he trusted. All Eugene had to do was say he wanted only the byproducts, then Lord Kamara would have no reason to reject the offer. Later, Bartel protested, saying that adding new members to the subjugation squad at the last moment was reckless. Frederick agreed, stating that a dungeon was no playground for children. If someone fell behind even once, they would die where they stood. Inside a dungeon, only life or death existed. If half-trained skills slowed them down, he would refuse outright. He added that since Eugene was a knight, his brother's expectations were already low. Bartel did not get along with neighboring nobles and lacked a strong network. If it came down to it, Frederick would prefer to speak to him directly. As the two were talking, Kamara entered and announced that Knight Eugene and his mercenary group would be joining the subjugation squad. Bartel's eyes narrowed as he recognized Eugene as the man from earlier, the one leading a mercenary group while dressed like that. With due respect, Bartel said, they could not accept someone whose background and skills were completely unverified. Kamara replied that he could at least guarantee Eugene's ability. The bandit group causing trouble on the outskirts of their territory had been wiped out by Sir Eugene with a single sword on his way here. His skills were more than sufficient. Without warning, Frederick hurled a dagger at Eugene. Eugene blocked it instantly. Frederick rose from his seat and walked toward him, saying he apologized for his rude words during their first meeting. With his unscarred skin and lack of a tan, Eugene looked like someone who had been raised quite gently. Frederick asked whether he would mind demonstrating his skills. That night, word spread through the village that Frederick was dueling someone. People poured into the arena as Frederick and Eugene faced each other. The bell rang and the match began. They rushed forward, blades flashing, striking and parrying in rapid succession. Laban remarked that, as expected of Eugene, Frederick was being pushed back when out of fight. Partik shook his head and disagreed. Frederick was only feeling him out. He was allowing himself to be pushed. As they fought, Frederick analyzed Eugene closely. His swordsmanship was rougher than expected, completely lacking fixed habits. Frederick could not identify his style at all. It was not polished or refined. It felt like something that had grown wild and feral, forged through survival rather than training halls. That was when Frederick spoke. He told Eugene that he had lied about being a knight. Frederick declares that Eugene has absolutely no proper training and is relying solely on his physical prowess. He says he will not claim that swordsmanship alone defines knighthood, but that a few exchanges are more than enough to reveal the truth. Eugene responds that Frederick talks too much. Frederick retorts that if Eugene defeats him, he will keep his mouth shut. In the next instant, Frederick delivers a massive blow that sends Eugene flying backward. The entire crowd gasps in shock. Bartel asks if he's been knocked out. Before the words even settle, Eugene surges forward again and launches himself at Frederick. Their swords collide head-on and shatter upon impact. Steel explodes into fragments. The two immediately grab each other, locking bodies instead of blades. Frederick thinks that Eugene's build is clearly smaller than his, so how can he possess such monstrous strength? He acknowledges that Eugene's raw power overwhelmingly surpasses his own, yet Frederick still holds the advantage in experience. Exploiting that edge, Frederick breaks Eugene's balance. Just as Eugene is about to fall, he adapts instantly, twisting his body mid-motion and shattering Frederick's stance instead. Frederick realizes that not a single one of Eugene's movements is precise. There is no form, no polish, only rapid adaptation and ruthless crisis management driven by pure survival instinct. Eugene's fist crashes into Frederick with brutal force, sending him flying into the wall behind him. The impact shatters the stone. The host announces Eugene as the victor. The arena erupts into thunderous cheers. As the crowd roars, Frederick rises to his feet and walks toward Eugene. He grabs Eugene's hand and raises it high, calling for another round of applause for tonight's winner. Bartel watches, his face twisted with fury. Afterward, the chef prepares a meal for Eugene, explaining that the orders came directly from Kamara. He insisted that Eugene must eat well and rest properly in preparation for opening the dungeon, and that he would personally oversee his meals with the utmost care. Eugene looks at the food with disgust and tells them he will accept the sentiment alone. From now on, he will take care of his own meals, so they are all dismissed. He instructs them to inform Lord Kamara that he prefers to be alone. From that day on, the way people look at him changes completely by 180 degrees. The next morning, Kamara calls on Eugene and asks whether he slept well. More importantly, he questions why Eugene rejected every amenity that was sent his way. As they are speaking, Frederick suddenly appears and grabs Eugene, laughing, as he calls him his friend and comrade. He complains that his face is still throbbing so badly that he tossed and turned all night. Eugene observes that Frederick no longer seems to care whether he is a true knight or not. One by one, those who were suspicious have abandoned their doubts. This is exactly the result Eugene wanted. Still, being surrounded by people so constantly is something he cannot get used to, even after several days. As they continue talking, Felid arrives and calls out to Eugene. The moment everyone sees him, they freeze in shock. Felid's body is battered and disheveled, covered in injuries, as he asks Eugene whether he has been well all this time. Inside a narrow alley, Bartel is beating a man mercilessly, snarling that if he had done his job properly, none of this would have happened. If he had killed him back in that cursed village from the very beginning, that so-called knight would never have made it to this castle. The man frantically apologizes, saying the mercenary group was supposed to be reliable. Bartel scoffs, calling them a pack of fools who were wiped out by common black wolves. He grabs the man by the face and snarls, asking if those eyes are stuck in his skull merely for decoration. If they are useless, he may as well dig them out himself. Afterward, Bartel clicks his tongue in irritation. He knows he cannot openly kill someone who has already crawled into the castle. As he broods, an idea suddenly strikes him. Inside a room, Eugene asks Felid about Bertel ordering him to participate in the dungeon opening. Eugene is certain of one thing. But what about Felid? Felid replies that he came here prepared to die, so if he is being sent into the dungeon simply to die, then so be it. Eugene reminds him of the uproar caused when the mercenaries heading to the village were slaughtered by black wolves. Those mercenaries were likely sent by one of his brothers. They never wanted him to reach the castle alive. However, Eugene tells him there is a way to survive. Felid only needs to become his squire. Felid is 16 and has already completed his coming-of-age ceremony. He does not require a guardian's approval. He can choose his own path either, wait quietly for them to kill him, or fight until his final breath. On the day of the dungeon opening, everyone gathers outside, bracing themselves for the worst. Frederick states plainly that since the dungeon has not yet opened, no one knows what monsters will emerge. Based on its size, they can expect goblins and kobolds in the low-rank areas, trolls and large spiders in the mid-rank zones, while high-ranked monsters remain entirely unpredictable. Their objective is to clear a path into the mid-rank area. If a high-ranked monster appears, they retreat immediately. Everyone agrees. Frederick orders the others to search the surroundings for any dungeon tunnels. Behind them, several porters whisper nervously about the dangers of the dungeon. Suddenly, Bartel grabs one of them and demands to know whether Felid is present. The porter hesitates before pointing toward Felid, saying that if he means that kid, he is right over there. Felid is speaking with Eugene when Bartel's expression darkens. He fumes inwardly, thinking the boy scurried over like a rat to that uncivilized man with no background. He shouts Felid's name, demanding to know if he is wasting time. Did he forget what he was told? He orders him to put on his pack and get to his position immediately. Felid stiffens in fear as Bartel strides toward him. Just as Bartel reaches out to grab him, Eugene seizes his wrist. Eugene demands to know whether Bartel truly intends to send a boy who has never held anything sharper than a kitchen knife into a dungeon opening. Is he insane? Bartel shakes Eugene's hand off, stating coldly that he only wishes to make his brother strong, so that he knows his place. Eugene counters that Bartel is the one who does not know his place, because that child became his squire as of yesterday. Everyone present is a witness. If Bartel dares to touch even a single hair on the boy's head, Eugene will treat it as a direct challenge. Bartel glares at him and asks who gave him permission. Does Eugene think taking in another family's child is that simple? This reckless decision will ruin the boy's future. As he speaks, murmurs ripple through the crowd, people whispering about Eugene and Frederick, marveling at their strength. Hearing this, Bartel's fury intensifies. Just then, Kamara arrives. He calmly states that Felid is 16, a proper adult who has completed his coming-of-age ceremony. Should he not be allowed to choose his own path? Eugene reflects silently. The field is prey. Once the weak are marked by a predator, survival becomes merciless. Even if they hide and hold their breath, the predator will eventually track them down and tear out their throat. If the weak cannot become strong, then they must form a pack. That is the only way they survive. A porter returns and reports that there are no signs of monsters nearby. It appears none escaped through the dungeon tunnels. Frederick gives the order to proceed. Together, they step forward and enter the dungeon. Deep inside the dungeon, the team is locked in fierce combat with goblins. Their numbers are overwhelming, and under the pressure, one of the porters panics. Frederick immediately barks at him, demanding to know if he is incapable of maintaining formation. He orders everyone to return to their positions and not allow the goblins to break through the line. As steel clashes and screams echo, the porter thinks bitterly that he knew this would happen. Volunteering for the opening subjugation was madness from the very beginning. Just as he turns to flee, hoping to escape, he freezes goblins block his path. In the next instant, Frederick cuts them down and drags the trembling porter back. He snaps at him, asking if he truly believed there would be no monsters behind him. This, he says coldly, is the safest place, as long as they stay together. He orders everyone to draw their swords and tighten the formation. As Frederick glances at the others fighting, doubt creeps in. Perhaps because these mercenaries were gathered in haste, their coordination is poor and their condition unstable. How is he supposed to conquer a dungeon with men like this? As the swarm grows denser, Eugene steps forward and calmly declares that he will take the rear. Without hesitation, he leaps deeper into the dungeon, plunging into the darkness as his mask slips back. Seeing this, Frederick grits his teeth and follows him in. While running, Frederick wonders just how far Eugene advanced in that brief moment. His question is answered abruptly when he stops short. Eugene is already standing there. Eugene tells them he slaughtered all the goblins pouring out from the intersection. More importantly, he says he found a flower just around the corner. Frederick looks around at the corpses scattered across the ground, his mind reeling. How can someone possess such overwhelming skill? Later, the team pauses to rest. A porter informs Eugene that they have gathered the remaining magic stones. Eugene inspects them, noting that unlike the one he absorbed before, these emit a faint blue glow. Miriam comments that it is a bit disappointing. The quality of a magic stone, she explains, is proportional to the strength of the monster. While dungeon monsters become roamers once they enter the wild, there is no rule stating that their magic stones grow stronger. The stone Eugene absorbed was enormous and exceptionally powerful. Such a roamer was special, rare beyond measure, and, above all, it was a powerful being that had usurped Miriam's territory. Hearing this, Eugene realizes just how fortunate he was to consume that magic stone. The thought barely settles when a deep rumble shakes the dungeon. Frederick immediately orders everyone back into formation. He declares that he and Eugene will take the lead and commands the others to follow closely behind. Eugene thinks that this is his first time in a dungeon as well, yet Frederick still places him at the front. Frederick leans closer and explains that monsters which have ruled parts of the dungeon for a long time often use goblins as pawns. In other words, they are at least mid-grade monsters. If they push further toward the center, high-grade monsters will be waiting in the depths. Eugene agrees. After consuming the red magic stone of the Swamp Master, he gained a significant ability. Now, curiosity stirs within him. If he absorbs another magic stone of that caliber, could he gain yet another power? Frederick suddenly hands Eugene a spear, asking if he wants to try using it. Eugene grips the spear, then hurls it into the darkness with pure brute force. The spear pierces through a monster, clearing a path forward. Everyone follows as Eugene charges ahead. He engages an orc head-on and begins to slaughter it mercilessly, watching him fight like a bloodthirsty beast. The onlookers burn the image into their minds. Elegant swordsmanship, fair and square combat, unwavering nobility, a posture that never loses dignity. That was the knight they admired. What they see now is something entirely different. Before them stands a creature drenched in blood, a knight whose presence reeks of slaughter, far removed from the ideal they once revered. After the fight, everyone stands frozen in shock. Frederick looks over the group and realizes that most of their forces have lost the will to push forward after witnessing the battle. It cannot be physical exhaustion, not yet. It is the mental shock, the overwhelming impact of what they saw earlier. Continuing any farther feels impossible. He calls out to Eugene, telling him that they have already met the quota and suggesting they head back now. Eugene replies calmly that he still has plenty of stamina left. Who knows when the next raid will come? If Frederick wants to return, he is free to do so. Frederick exhales and says that leaves them no choice but to keep going. Just then, Eugene suddenly leaps down and tells Frederick to lead the subjugation squad out of the dungeon. From here on, he will continue with only his mercenaries. Without hesitation, Eugene turns and walks deeper inside. Watching him leave, Frederick realizes that Eugene sensed the soldiers' exhaustion and chose to let them withdraw. As his figure disappears into the darkness, Frederick thinks that Eugene is a man who forces him to rethink what the word knight truly means. Deep inside the dungeon, Laban holds a torch, his hands trembling. He never wanted to come this far, but he tells himself that Sir Eugene can handle anything if something goes wrong. Suddenly, something catches his eye. He looks closer and freezes. A spider. Then he looks up. The entire ceiling is crawling with giant cave spiders. Laban screams. Seeing the sheer number of them, part each shouts that there are too many and they should retreat. But before panic can fully spread, Eugene swings his sword once and in a single slash wipes them out. Even so, amid the chaos, one spider manages to drag Laban down. As it prepares to strike, Eugene instantly intervenes, cutting it apart and shielding him with his body. After the beasts are defeated, Laban stammers that it is incredible, but surely they have done enough now. Shouldn't they head back? He looks at Partik. Partik is trembling. His body is frozen stiff as he stares ahead at something standing before them. Even among roamers of the same species, ranks exist. Because higher ranks appear so rarely, they are usually excluded from subjugation planning altogether, but there is no mistaking it. The high-ranking form of the giant cave spider, a lord. The monster lets out an enraged scream. Partik says they cannot handle a lord-rank monster. At the very least, they need to call Frederick. Just then, Eugene speaks calmly, telling both of them to fall back. This one, he says, is his. Hearing that, both Partik and Laban flee without looking back, running for their lives. After they are gone, Miriam remarks that it looks like their instincts collapsed under the overwhelming gap in status between predator and prey. Eugene studies the beast and asks if this lord is a roamer on the same tier as the swamp master. Miriam replies that it looks even stronger. Eugene nods, his eyes narrowing. Then that must mean the magic stone will be even bigger. He steps forward and faces the beast head-on. The next day, Eugene sits with the others, quietly reflecting. He realizes that the second ability he acquired after devouring the Lord's magic stone deep within the dungeon is camouflage. By combining it with the skin-hardening ability he obtained first using a hardened layer to protect his flesh while reproducing the appearance of human skin through camouflage, he has finally secured the freedom to stand beneath the open sunlight. The girls sit gathered around him, staring openly. They ask if he is really walking around without his mask now. One question follows another in rapid succession, their curiosity relentless, until Miriam intervenes, saying that their master is having his energy completely drained and that they should save their tales of valor for later. One of the girls tilts her head and remarks that Eugene possesses such exquisite beauty that he must surely have some elven blood in his ancestry. Hearing that, Frederick walks over, nodding slowly as he speaks. That explains everything, he says. No wonder Eugene had such keen eyesight even in the pitch-black dungeon, and hearing as sharp as a wild dog's. Judging by his agile movements and the monstrous force behind his spear throw, Frederick admits he knew there was no way Eugene was merely an ordinary human. To think he had the blood of an elf coursing through his veins, and with a face like that, it would have been nearly impossible not to stand out in these lands. How then had he managed to keep such a low profile all this time? Eugene calmly replies that it is not as though he concealed it intentionally. As he speaks, his presence seems almost mesmerizing, and those around him feel inexplicably flustered. Eugene thinks to himself that if he faces suspicion in the future, claiming elven ancestry may serve as a convenient excuse. Yet devouring the magic stone this time granted him more than just a new ability. At the exact moment the tattoo vanished, memories he had never seen before began flooding his mind. He saw himself, his current form, lying in a place completely unknown to him. A soft hand was clasping his own. In an unfamiliar space filled with the ringing of bells, countless people were watching him. Who on earth was that woman in his memory, and more importantly, was this truly his memory at all? He has no recollection of his past. The only thing he remembers is the name Eugene. Just then, Laban calls out to him, desperately asking him to save him. Frederick follows, saying he heard everything, that Laban had been nothing but dead weight to Eugene. Eugene looks at them and thinks that the only thing he truly remembers is his name. However, this recent event has sparked a certain hunch within him. If he erases these tattoos one by one, just as he did this time, he feels that he may finally uncover the truth. Not false identities like being a knight or having elven blood, but who he truly was. Later, inside the king's chamber, Lord T1 remarks that he has heard they successfully suppressed the dungeon opening. Frederick steps forward and introduces himself, saying it is an honor to meet him. Eugene introduces himself as well. Lord T1 acknowledges them, saying they must have endured great hardship and thanking them for their service. He then tells Eugene that he was informed Eugene requires a certificate to prove his identity, and that this document shall serve as the perfect guarantee of his standing. Eugene expresses his gratitude. At that moment, Lord T1 collapses. Kamara rushes forward and grasps his hand. Lord T1, struggling to breathe, tells him that the ambition of the second son weighs so heavily on his heart that he cannot close his eyes in peace. Kamara assures him not to worry, promising that he will faithfully lead the domain his father spent his entire life building. Lord T1 calls him his beloved eldest son and tells him that a domain is nothing more than dust and soil. A lord, he says, must never set his sights on land but on the people he leads. With those words, he passes away. The chamber fills with mourning. Eugene observes quietly, thinking that although he does not know what kind of Lord T1 truly was, it is clear that many people genuinely grieve his passing. However, even in the face of the same death, not everyone shares the same sentiment as his gaze drifts to Bartiel. Afterward, Frederick prepares to depart, apologizing for having to leave in the middle of the funeral. Kamara tells him it is quite alright, as he understands Frederick has a schedule to keep. Frederick then asks Eugene if he truly intends to remain here. Eugene replies that he plans to visit the dungeon one more time. It would be a waste to leave now, considering the trouble caused by the dungeon opening. Frederick sighs, saying it is a shame. He extends his hand, saying it was an honor to measure himself against such a strong knight, and that he hopes the next time they meet, it will not be as enemies. Eugene shakes his hand. After Frederick leaves, Eugene asks Partik to prepare for departure. Felid looks confused and asks if Eugene did not say he was going to stay here. Just then, Partik asks what Frederick was riding when he left. Felid answers that it was a horse. Partik nods and says precisely that it's only natural for a knight to ride a horse. They decide to head to the merchant guild to sell off the monster byproducts and acquire a horse for Eugene as well. Felid declares that as Eugene's squire, he vows to serve him with all his might. Eugene calmly replies that he will not be needing Felid's assistance for the time being. Felid freezes, stunned, asking what Eugene means by that. Afterward, Felid finds himself in the kingdom of Keelar's largest commercial city, Marin. Birds circle high in the sky as, on the outskirts of the city, Laban and the others set down the dungeon materials. The merchants stare in disbelief, asking if they truly mean that a single knight brought in all of this. Laban nods and tells them about Eugene. At the sound of that name, one of the merchants stiffens. The knight who cleared the dungeon opening in T1 territory not long ago, the rookie knight who tore a troll's head clean off while it was still alive. Felid lowers another bundle of materials, glancing up at a nearby building. This discussion is taking longer than expected. Inside one of the rooms, a man assures Eugene not to worry. As a representative of Marin's prestigious Pylon Merchant Guild, Billmore declares that he will take full responsibility for handling these materials. As Eugene studies Billmore, he recalls how skeptical he had been when Partik claimed to know a reliable merchant. He never imagined he would be introduced to someone from such a massive guild. Mid-conversation, the door suddenly opens. Partik stiffens when he sees the newcomer and quietly tells Eugene that the situation may become complicated. That man, he explains, is the secretary serving under the guild's vice manager. Eugene asks what that means. Partik explains that it means the man holds more authority than Billmore himself and that he has likely come to seize their materials at a lower price. Billmore addresses the man, calling him Grail, and states that Eugene is someone he is currently in the middle of contracting with. Grail cuts him off coldly, remarking that he sees no signed contract anywhere. Turning his attention to Eugene, Grail praises him mockingly for spreading exaggerated rumors to inflate the value of his goods. A tactic typical of rookies, he says, one he can see straight through. Grail then informs Eugene that the vice manager of the guild wishes to personally sign a contract with him and politely requests that he rise from the shabby place and accompany him. At that moment, Eugene locks eyes with him. Grail falters, visibly startled. He hastily introduces himself as the secretary of the vice manager, explaining that this is a tremendous opportunity that will greatly benefit Eugene. Yet Eugene continues to release an overwhelming pressure without saying a word. Crushed beneath it, Grail loses his composure. He stammers that he never intended any discourtesy, bows deeply, apologizes, and retreats at once. Billmore exhales in disbelief, saying he is truly moved. To think Eugene would reject a contract with the vice manager such resolve. From this moment forward, he pledges his unwavering support. Eugene says he likes the sound of that and tells Billmore they should begin immediately, asking him to come outside. Elsewhere, Grail kneels before the vice manager, admitting he has no excuse. That man was no ordinary knight. The vice manager gazes out the window calmly. Knights often cause trouble for merchants, she says, clinging to honor and pride. In such cases, merchants simply respond in their own way. With money and goods as their power, it should not be difficult, especially when the opponent is a poor knight without even a proper horse. She instructs Grail to deliver Eugene a gift. Outside, Felid asks Eugene if he truly intends for him to stay behind and handle the selling of the materials. Eugene confirms it. He should continue selling the monster materials Eugene brings back through Billmore. Felid bristles, asking if this is because he lacks the skill to follow him. If so, he declares he will begin sword training immediately. Eugene calmly asks him what the role of a squire is. Felid answers that a squire assists the knight he serves in both combat and daily life. Eugene nods. Exactly. His duty is to support his daily life selling materials, managing funds, and handling logistics. He tells Felid to stay with Billmore and learn the details of the business. Billmore will teach him many things. Felid clenches his fists. He feels belittled, thinking that without Eugene he would have died long ago, but complaining over something so small would be disgraceful. Then Eugene adds that once they gather enough funds, he will consider teaching Felid swordsmanship. After all, the day will come when Felid must assist him in battle. Felid accepts the command eagerly, his heart swelling with excitement. Later, while walking to the market, Eugene asks Partik whether money always disappears this quickly. He bought only the bare essentials, yet nothing remains. Suddenly, Eugene's gaze is drawn to a suit of armor. Partik explains that it's plate armor, the very romance of every knight. Eugene asks if it is expensive. Partik scoffs. It is not merely expensive, he says. It is a priceless item, one that even wealthy knights pass down through generations. As they speak, Laven comes running toward them in a panic. A massive storm of roamers has appeared on the eastern outskirts of the city. The guilds are barely holding them back. Partik suggests it would be best to participate in the subjugation. Eugene questions that idea, but Laban quickly explains. Unlike clearing a dungeon with an owner, roamer subjugation incurs no commission fee, and this is a city of merchants overflowing with capital. It is the optimal location to sell monster materials and loot at premium prices without transportation costs. In short, it means massive profit. Hearing that, Eugene agrees. Just then, Grail intercepts them. He informs Eugene that he has come to deliver a warhorse, a gift from the vice manager. Eugene stares at him coldly. Grail swallows, feeling that terrifying gaze again, and hurriedly explains that the gift comes with no expectations in return. Without another word, Eugene mounts the horse and rides off, telling Grail to inform her that he said thanks. Laban and Partik follow closely behind, leaving Grail standing alone. In the forest on the eastern outskirts of the city, goblins swarm to the underbrush. Eugene arrives and immediately begins cutting them down. Miriam observes that if roamers have already reached this area, the scale of the outbreak must be enormous. Most of the guild members guarding a front are likely already dead. Eugene replies that it works out perfectly. He does not like sharing his loot. After cutting down the goblins, Eugene arrives at the battlefield. Before him, orcs clash violently with the soldiers. A lone knight is surrounded, struggling to hold his ground as the orcs close in. If they don't kill him, the knight shouts grimly, they'll never advance any farther. A pack of orcs corners him. He stumbles, falls to the ground, and fear grips him as he screams for help. In that instant, a sword comes flying to the air. It pierces straight through one of the orcs, killing it instantly. Eugene bursts into the sunlight and, in a single sweeping slash, cuts down the remaining orcs. Blood sprays as their bodies collapse. Staring in disbelief, the knight asks for Eugene's name. Eugene fixes him with a cold glare. Is that important right now? He asks. If they die here, it will all be meaningless. The knight laughs loudly. Then if they survive this living hell, he'll ask again. They fight side by side, carving through the enemy together. Later, inside the city, the knight recounts the battle to the gathered citizens. He tells them of the warrior who fought alongside him. The citizens eagerly ask for the knight's name. When he speaks of Eugene, the crowd erupts. Cheers echo through the streets as people chant his name, hailing him as their hero. Inside a tall building, a man gazes out through a window. The more famous he becomes, the harder he will be to control. He is Louis Phelan, Marin's former city mayor and the Phelan Guild's former representative. Louis turns to the vice manager and asks if she is truly confident it is safe to let things proceed as they are. He addresses her affectionately, his beautiful granddaughter, Priscilla. Priscilla nods calmly. Everything remains within controllable limits. In fact, she admits she had been hoping Eugene would become famous. The higher a knight's fame rises, the greater his fear of losing it. She then asks her grandfather if he is aware of the heir Eugene keeps close. Louis raises an eyebrow. She means the child whose byproducts Eugene sells through the guild. Priscilla confirms it. From her investigation, that child is a hidden, illegitimate offspring of the T1 family. Eugene appears to be earning heavily in order to support the child. If they maintain close ties with both of them, they could secure a connection to someone who may one day become the new head of the T1 family. Hearing her scheme, Louis smirks, just as he expected from his granddaughter. He understands her plan clearly, secure the loyalty of a knight protecting an illegitimate heir, and as mayor, he must also send a gift. After all, he cannot fail to reward the hero who resolved such a massive problem for the city. Later, Priscilla sits alone in her chambers, deep in thought. A thirsty person will always seek water, and for a merchant there is only one course of action. Dig the well, then wait patiently as the water flows, selling it without arousing suspicion. At that moment, the door opens. Eugene enters. She rises to welcome him, calling him the hero who saved the city. Eugene replies that he has come to thank her, asking if she is Priscilla, the vice manager of Marin's Phelan Guild. She confirms it, and invites him to sit. As she studies him, she thinks it is difficult to believe that someone with such an appearance could tear a troll's head clean off. He is unlike any knight she has ever encountered. She remarks that the armor gifted by the mayor suits him well. It was commissioned from the finest workshop in the city, crafted from a special alloy of Elsic iron and ogre bone, strong enough that even a dragon's fangs would struggle to pierce it. Eugene thanks her. With such armor, the next dungeon raid will be far safer. He also expresses his gratitude for the exceptional lodging and meals provided. Thanks to that, his mercenaries are in better condition, and he expects even greater results moving forward. Priscilla giggles lightly and says she would like to make him an offer. Eugene rises instead. He says he is busy and must take his leave. Surprised, Priscilla asks if he is leaving already. Eugene explains that once the T1 family's dungeon raid is fully completed, his work here will be done. His contract is only for the dungeon byproducts this time. This may very well be their last meeting. Priscilla asks him to wait. Surely there is more for them to discuss. Eugene turns back and asks what she means. She smiles faintly. There are limits to pretending not to notice. She gestures subtly as she speaks the most expensive full-plate armor in the city, a pedigree-certified warhorse, luxury accommodations, and lavish meals provided even for his mercenaries. The byproducts he sold to the guild do not even cover half the cost of what he has received. Her gaze sharpens. Did he never learn as a child that everything has a price? Or is he a shameless knight, one who neither understands honor nor cares what happens when the citizens who praise him discover the truth? Priscilla asks if he plans to take everything and simply walk away. Eugene's expression hardens as he replies that he finds it amusing. She summons people whenever she pleases, forces unwanted gifts upon them, and then demands repayment for those same gifts. He glares at her and asks whether a mere merchant is truly trying to intimidate him right now. The room goes silent as he tells her to let him make one thing clear before she gets the wrong idea. He has already signed a contract with the Pylon Merchant Guild through Billmore. As long as they purchase his goods properly, he does not care what people whisper behind his back. Still, as she herself said, everything has a price. She may gossip all she wants, but then she will learn what it truly means to pay that price. He turns away, stating that if this continues, he doubts any knight would bother stepping forward the next time the city faces danger. He is finished here and will take his leave. As they move to go, Partik speaks up, saying what a shame it is. If she had approached things differently, they could have built a strong partnership. Just then, Priscilla calls out, asking him to please wait. She admits she acted rudely. She bows deeply before Eugene and apologizes, saying her greed to gain leverage over him clouded her judgment. With sincere regret for her disrespect, she asks to start over from the beginning. She proposes keeping the contract with Billmore exactly as it is while adding one additional clause. She guarantees that the concerns Eugene holds will never come to pass. She reflects inwardly that she has seen countless knights grovel the moment fancy sponsorship is dangled before them. This one, however, is far too dangerous to toy with. Her instincts as a merchant will not allow her to lose him. Eugene sits back down and says he supposes he can at least hear her out, but it had better be worth his time. She thanks him. Later, Eugene and the others walk toward the dungeon. Reviewing the contract, Partik tells Eugene that he landed an exceptional deal. The Pylon Merchant Guild operates on such a massive scale that no one can ignore it. Their headquarters are in Marin, with hundreds of branches spread across the Roman Empire. They even trade with nobles ruling demonic territories such as the T1 family. For a guild like that to offer unrestricted access to any dungeon or labyrinth linked to their branches is extraordinary. It is far better than formal backing from a noble house. Eugene remarks dryly that the funny thing is, he only said all that because he was annoyed. Just then a voice scoffs, asking whether wearing flashy armor alone makes someone a knight. Eugene and the others turn to see a group of mercenaries. One steps forward, mocking him, asking if Eugene can even grip a sword properly. At that moment, Kamara calls out. Eugene dismounts his horse and greets him. Kamara remarks that Eugene has changed dramatically in such a short time. Eugene asks about the situation. Kamara explains that his brother has hired new mercenaries, but something feels off. The group hired last time was already broken, but these new ones give off the same foul stench. For this dungeon raid, Kamara asks Eugene to act as captain. One mercenary steps forward and asks mockingly whether, if Eugene dies in the dungeon, he gets to become the captain next. Kamara bristles, demanding what kind of reckless talk that is. The mercenary replies that he does not enjoy saying it, but this is not a leisurely stroll. A dungeon is a place where lives are cheap, and they need to be prepared for the worst. Eugene looks at him and says it is not a bad idea. If he dies, the man can be captain. Then he tells everyone that since they have a backup plan, they should get moving. Miriam points out Bartle and remarks that this is just another one of his schemes. He plans to use the mercenaries to get rid of Eugene inside the dungeon. Watching his plans fall apart, however, is rather entertaining. They enter the dungeon. Inside, Eugene cuts down beasts effortlessly, killing them with casual precision. The mercenary leader watches him in disbelief, so the rumors were not exaggerated. Eugene is fighting from the very front, doing the work of 100 men, while the mercenaries linger uselessly behind him. The leader grits his teeth. He needs to wait for the right moment. Just one opening for his poison-coated blade to brush against that cursed face. After some time, Eugene announces that beyond this point, only mid-rank monsters appear. He cannot guarantee their safety any farther. Only those willing may follow. The mercenaries insist on continuing, saying that if the captain goes, how can they stop? Laban agrees to proceed, but Partik stops him. Sensing that Eugene has something else in mind, deep within the dungeon, Eugene reflects that the last time he was here, Frederick was with him. As expected, it is nowhere near as enjoyable without him. He remembers Frederick as an outstanding leader, someone who boosted morale at the right moments and always took on the most dangerous roles himself. If Frederick were here, he might have cleared this dungeon even with such a sorry group. Eugene wonders how Frederick would handle this situation, then he stops and looks back. Drop the clumsy act already. Miriam immediately prepares an attack. Eugene warns them that if they wish to die, they are free to do so. Miriam unleashes her power, extinguishing every torch at once. Darkness floods the dungeon. The group panics, shouting for light, unable to see anything. Then Eugene begins killing them slowly, silently. The mercenary leader stiffens. This was not what he expected. He tries to light a fire, thinking that without baggage slowing him down, this might be the perfect chance to rampage alone. But then silence. Absolute silence. His heart pounds as he realizes he can no longer hear anything. Suddenly, Eugene appears beside him and whispers, asking if he needs a light. Eugene ignites a flame, illuminating the space just enough. He remarks calmly that human eyes struggle in the dark. It must be frustrating. He asks if the man can see clearly now. A demonic beast stands before them. Eugene asks softly whether he can finally see who is hunting and who is being hunted. At night, rain pours relentlessly as Kamara bursts open the door and calls out to Eugene. Eugene turns to him as Kamara demands to know whether the news he heard is true. Bertel follows closely behind, asking what all this commotion is about. Eugene replies calmly that they can hear it directly from the person involved. He then throws the leader of the mercenaries onto the floor before them. Bertel stiffens and calls him Maverick. Maverick, wide-eyed with shock, blurts out that he tried to kill Eugene at Bertel's instigation. Bertel bursts into laughter, brushing it off and saying that the man has always spouted nonsense and has finally lost his mind. Kamara suddenly shouts at him, asking how far he intends to take this. Bertel counters by asking whether Kamara truly believes the ramblings of a madman. He then orders Maverick to stop speaking gibberish and speak clearly. At that moment, Eugene tightens his control over Maverick. Maverick mutters that he is useless, that he deserves to die, and suddenly throws himself out the window. His body crashes onto a statue below, killing him instantly. Bertel turns to Kamara and remarks that the man clearly went insane after witnessing people torn apart by monsters and that it is strange to believe such nonsense. Kamara coldly replies that what looks even stranger is how relieved Bertel appears at the sight of a man's death. Bertel snaps, lashing out at Eugene, demanding to know how he dares frame him with such ridiculous delusions of persecution. Eugene asks him solemnly, on his honor as a knight, whether he is truly innocent. Bertel agrees without hesitation. Eugene then declares that, staking his honor and truth as a knight, he requests a trial by combat. Bertel grits his teeth. The next morning, citizens murmur among themselves as Eugene and Bertel stand facing one another. Kamara announces that since their claims are sharply divided, the truth shall be determined through a duel. The victor, guided by God's righteous will, shall reveal the truth. The duel begins as Bertel charges forward, launching a fierce attack. Eugene blocks every strike. As their blades clash, Eugene recalls the past, thinking that he had been chased for over 10 years by a man like this. Bertel's eyes widen as Eugene counters, knocking his sword from his grasp. Eugene tells him to pick it up. Bertel freezes in disbelief. Though Bertel's swordsmanship is not lacking, it becomes painfully obvious, even to those ignorant of combat, that Eugene is overwhelmingly superior. Midway through the fight, Eugene slices off Bertel's hand. Kamara rushes forward and calls for the duel to stop. Eugene coldly tells him to stop ordering him around. The duel is not over. Kamara shouts that he cannot simply stand by and watch his brother die. Bertel is incapacitated and can no longer prove his claim. The victor is Eugene. Bertel insists that he can still continue, but Kamara orders him to stop, saying the outcome is already decided. He urges him to admit his sin like a knight and repent in prison. Bertel demands to know what he did wrong. Then, in desperation, he grabs his sword and lunges at Eugene, screaming that if only Eugene had never existed, if only he had never appeared in his life, he would not have suffered such humiliation. In a single motion, Eugene slices off his head. As Bertel's consciousness fades, he wonders why his body no longer listens to him. Eugene remarks that he should have grasped the final chance his brother gave him, then turns and leaves, while Kamara remains behind. The next day, as Eugene walks, Miriam asks whether it was not a waste. Bertel was the first king he created, yet Eugene used him merely to draw out a confession and discarded him so casually. Eugene replies that Berto was mentally weak and could not even withstand becoming kin properly. Leaving him alive would have risked exposing the fact that he had become a vampire. He was merely suitable as a consumable to force a trial by combat. Above all, Eugene asks whether she truly thought he would keep someone alive who bared his fangs at him. Miran remarks that vampires naturally command countless slaves, as slaves are symbols of power. As Eugene reaches for a door, he thinks that turning weaklings into kin only creates more work to clean up. If only there had been even one person he liked. He opens the door and overhears Billmore and Priscilla speaking about Galfredrick. Both of them stop when they notice Eugene. Billmore tells him they heard the news that he successfully completed the dungeon subjugation. Eugene replies that it is good to see him as well, then asks what happened to Sir Galfredrick. They explain that 2 weeks earlier, Galfredrick participated in a labyrinth subjugation in the Evergrow Count's territory. He reportedly went missing alone within the labyrinth. The intermediate monster zones were searched thoroughly, but not a single belonging was found. It is believed he failed to return from the advanced monster zone. Hearing this, Eugene mounts his horse and rides out immediately. Eugene opens the door, only to see a man standing at the top of the stairs welcoming him. Eugene looks at him, as the man says he has already heard many rumors about him, and that it is an honor to finally meet him in person. Eugene addresses him as Lord Jevon and thanks him for the warm welcome. Jevon replies that, given the circumstances, he should come inside. He introduces himself as Jevon Evergrow, the eldest son of House Evergrow. Jevon tells Eugene that it seems Frederick may have pushed his ambition too far. They had planned to grant him a title if the subjugation was successful, but they never imagined he would enter the upper floors alone. Eugene questions him, and Jevon explains that the upper floors Frederick ventured into are areas their house has not been able to touch for over 100 years. It is where the master of the labyrinth resides. As Eugene presses further, another man interjects, saying it is not merely a resident, but an entity that controls the entire labyrinth. Frederick, blinded by the desire to earn merit, made a reckless decision and ended up causing trouble for many. Jevon then realizes he forgot to make introductions and introduces the man as Lou Gates, one of their domain knights who led the subjugation alongside Frederick. Lou Gates greets Eugene respectfully, saying it is an honor to meet him. He mentions hearing rumors that Eugene defeated Frederick in a duel. Strangely enough, they share an unexpected similarity, as Lou Gates himself was the champion of the tournament and had also defeated Frederick there. Eugene, clearly irritated, asks if that detail is truly important right now. Jevon steps in, saying it only shows how valuable Frederick was to them as well. Regarding the entire incident, he offers his sincere apologies. He has heard that Eugene and Frederick were extremely close friends. Jevon then sits down and says that for a friend willing to come all this way, they will offer their full support, so Eugene should listen carefully. Jevon explains that for the past 100 years, their family has attempted expeditions into the upper floors multiple times, but the outcome was always the same. Everyone went missing. Because of this, once someone has been missing for over a month, the search is terminated and they are officially declared dead. Eugene is visibly shocked upon hearing this. He immediately stands, saying he will set out at once, but Jevon stops him. He says he understands Eugene's urgency, but the labyrinth is not somewhere one can simply stroll into like a city plaza. In 3 days, Sir Lugetse and he will have a proper subjugation team prepared. Until then, Eugene should rest. Eugene thanks them, and just as he is about to leave, Jevon adds that they recently hired a mage and will assign her to assist him as well. Later, Eugene walks through the city while Miriam begins complaining about Jevon. As he walks, Eugene thinks that too many things do not add up. Before he and Frederick parted ways, Frederick said he was going to receive an appointment from Count Evergrow. His title was already confirmed, and he was heading toward Evergrow territory. Yet now, he was suddenly sent on another labyrinth expedition. Why such an abrupt change? More importantly, the man Eugene knew would never act recklessly out of greed. If Frederick were going, he would have formed a proper team and proceeded with extreme caution. Suddenly, citizens began gathering around a person shouting about a messiah descending upon them. Eugene looks at the crowd as Miriam asks if this is not exactly what those strange people were talking about earlier. She watches them with disbelief, wondering what they are even talking about, while Eugene remarks that the atmosphere of this village is clearly abnormal. Someone hands Eugene a flyer. As he reads it, his thoughts race, beasts dying from tremors near the labyrinth. Could a part of the labyrinth have collapsed, allowing monsters to escape through the cracks? If that were the case, then why did Frederick? His mind is flooded with questions. He tells Miriam they are heading to the labyrinth immediately. 3 days is far too long. They will go ahead and begin searching on their own. Just as he is about to leave, someone walks past him and mutters that they did not expect to see a vampire here. Eugene freezes. The shady figure continues, saying they thought vampires on this continent were nearly extinct thanks to relentless paladin hunts, yet here one strolls around in broad daylight so casually. In an instant, Eugene grabs the person by the neck and drags them into a nearby alley, demanding to know how they recognized him so easily. He pins her against the wall as she calmly tells him she is a blood shadow. Hearing this, Miriam remarks that the term sounds familiar. Realization dawns on her, and she quickly tells Eugene to stop. He cannot kill her. Miriam explains that she is a blood shadow mage and that her lineage has served vampires for generations. Later, inside a room, the girl tells Eugene that he cannot simply attack people on sight. How is she supposed to answer when his hand is wrapped around her throat? Eugene apologizes. She then properly introduces herself as Sinoa Romari of the Blood Shadow School, mages who serve vampires. Their school can sense vampires instantly due to their nature, and she says it is an honor to meet a descendant of the Dark Clan. In fact, she reveals that she was already searching for him at Jevon's request. Eugene realizes she must be the mage Jevon mentioned earlier. Romari brings up his friendship with Frederick again, and Eugene thinks that when he finally finds Frederick, he will sew his mouth shut. Romari then explains that she was present during the expedition when Frederick went missing. At the time, she needed monster materials and volunteered for the expedition. The labyrinth is infamous for its danger, but since its discovery 100 years ago, every area except the upper floors had been fully cleared. Everyone felt relatively safe advancing deeper. However, as they moved forward, a massive roar shook the entire labyrinth, and the ground beneath her collapsed. Just as she was about to fall, Frederick, who was guarding the rear, pushed her to safety and fell in her place. Thanks to him, she barely escaped with her life. Everyone else believes the earthquake occurred because Frederick opened the upper floor gate. But because she owed him her life, she felt that at the very least, she needed to tell his closest friend the truth. Eugene thinks grimly that, just as he expected, the story does not match Jevon's explanation. Either Jevon lied to him, or someone twisted the truth along the way. Then Romari adds that there is something else she saw down there. Deep below where Frederick fell, there was a massive eye. Eugene questions her, and she asks if he remembers the flyers the strange cultists were handing out in the plaza earlier. The image drawn on them looked exactly like what she saw. As they speak, somewhere deep beneath the earth, a cult continues performing a mysterious ritual. Afterward, all the volunteers gather at the site. Eugene surveys them quietly when Lugatis approaches and asks how it feels. Is he excited at the thought of encountering his close friend? He adds that he hopes they will not be returning with a corpse. Eugene replies calmly that Frederick is not the type to die easily, causing Lugatis to burst into laughter. Eugene thinks that if it were up to him, he would have entered the labyrinth long ago. But now that he knows Frederick's disappearance was not a simple accident, he needs to keep Lugatis within close sight. Frederick survived 3 weeks. Surely he can last 3 more days. Just then, a group approaches and greets Eugene, introducing themselves as Templars from the monastery under Evergrow. They say that fighting alongside such a devout knight is a true honor. Deeply moved by his willingness to face danger, they ask to fight together in the name of God. Eugene simply tells them to do their best. Rugates chuckles and remarks that since the Templars follow God's will, it is rare for them to take interest in a knight. Perhaps Eugene should switch his class to a holy knight someday. Eugene feels irritated by the comment and calls Partsheek, asking to speak with him privately for a moment. Later, inside the labyrinth, Rugates instructs everyone to halt and remain vigilant. They are to drink water, rest briefly, and then return to their positions. As the group pauses, Miriam comments that the place is incredible, overflowing with water energy. Eugene looks around, realizing it is clearly an artificially created space. Unlike a dungeon, basic survival here is possible. If the worst were to happen, one could hide and survive in a labyrinth like this. Lugatis arrives beside him and remarks that it is indeed the perfect place for wicked things to lurk and thrive. He then compliments Eugene, saying his skills are truly impressive. Remarkable that not a single person died on the way here. Eugene asks how much farther it was from where Frederick went missing. Lugates tells him not to be impatient. He says that while he trusted Frederick, the person Eugene should trust most right now is him. Did he not already say that House Evergrow uncovered all the traps in this labyrinth? Eugene scoffs, remarking that if that were true, people would not be dying every time. Lugates grins at him and asks if they should instead call it a sacrifice, an offering made in hopes of passing through safely. Suddenly, the ground begins to shake violently. Eugene wonders if it is an earthquake, but Lugatis orders everyone to brace themselves. The structure of a labyrinth is shifting. Eugene is stunned when Lugatis explains that this is the area where the walls change every second and where the shortcut to the upper levels lies. Eugene asks where this shortcut is supposed to be. Lugatis smirks and points, saying it is right there. Then he disappears. In the next moment, Eugene and Romari find themselves trapped elsewhere. Romari asks where they are. Eugene grimly realizes that, as expected, the quake was not natural. Frederick fell into a trap Lugatis already knew about and was framed. The question now is, what is his true objective? Suddenly, Eugene freezes. Before him, Frederick is tied to a pole, his body covered in deep wounds. He is battered and barely conscious. Eugene rushes to him and checks his condition. He is still alive. If they can get him out and treat him. Miriam interrupts, saying something feels wrong. She sensed it earlier, but deep below, there is something with a different texture, something unnatural. A violent gust of wind erupts as a massive door opens. From within, a minotaur steps forward. Romary gasps in shock, asking how something like that can be here. Eugene orders her to protect Frederick as he charges the beast. But in an instant, the minotaur strikes him and sends him flying. Eugene and the others are thrown back as the creature slams the ground, shattering stone. Eugene looks at Frederick and leaps toward him to shield him, but Romary raises a barrier, stopping him. Eugene glares at her furiously, demanding to know what insanity she is committing. Trembling, Romary tells him that the creature is a minotaur, a top-tier beast even among high-ranking monsters. Even a vampire would be killed. Eugene presses his sword to her neck, accusing her of overstepping her bounds. She apologizes but insists she cannot stand by and watch a vampire rush towards certain death. Charging blindly at a minotaur gives them almost no chance of victory. If Eugene truly wants to save Frederick, he must assess the situation with a clear and calm mind. As they hesitate, the wall behind them suddenly seals shut. Lugace's voice echoes from the other side. He remarks that he did not know the mage could use earth magic, the one who barely survived thanks to Frederick. He had thought she was merely an oddball who knew nothing beyond creating chimeras. Locking his eyes onto him, Eugene grabs Lugates by the neck, accusing him of being the one who reduced Frederick to this state. Lugates calmly responds that, since Eugene seemed to miss his close friends so much, he merely arranged a reunion. He adds that, contrary to what he had heard, Eugene is quite rude. Lugates grips Eugene's wrist and casually pushes his hand away. Eugene is visibly startled. Lugates removes his glove, revealing a tattoo glowing with an eerie light. Eugene immediately realizes that the monstrous strength Lugates displayed earlier was not his own. Seeing the mark, Romary explains that it is forbidden magic, one that allows power transfer. Originally, it was used to transfer strength between humans. But once people began siphoning power from non-human entities, it was outlawed completely. Lugates scoffs, saying that such labels are nothing more than cowardly wordplay invented by those who wish to monopolize power. They, however, are the chosen ones. When despair engulfs the world, God will select them to survive. Eugene coldly responds that Lugates borrowed someone else's power to defeat Frederick, and then flaunted it as if it were his own skill. He releases his true power, declaring that if that is the case, he will teach him his proper place. Eugene lunges forward, and Lugates recoils in surprise. Their powers collide violently, generating crushing pressure that shakes the surroundings. Romary stares in disbelief, thinking about the overwhelming force radiating from Eugene. Can a normal vampire truly emit such power? Lugates narrows his eyes and remarks that hiding Eugene's strength had not been a bad decision after all. He strikes Eugene, knocking him backward just as the labyrinth's mechanism activates once more. Lugates mocks him, reminding him that he clearly stated all the traps in this labyrinth had already been uncovered, so they should continue falling. In a burst of rage, Eugene calls out to Romary. She instantly forms a barrier. Eugene steps onto it and launches himself toward the Lugates as the wall begins to close. Through a narrowing gap, Eugene manages to graze the Lugates' face. Lugates grimaces, thinking that while he had heard rumors of Eugene's strength, what he witnessed far exceeded his expectations. If they had fought head-on, victory would not have been assured. Using Frederick as bait without killing him had indeed been the correct choice. Now the final sacrifice would be offered. Eugene and Romary plunge down to the deepest level of the labyrinth. Upon landing, Eugene immediately moves forward. Romary asks where he is going and follows him in frustration. She then sees Eugene carrying Frederick back toward her and asks if she can save him. She hesitates, admitting that healing magic is not her specialty. Eugene presses her, saying that was not an answer to his question. She swallows and agrees to try. As she begins healing, Miriam informs Eugene that she has searched the area and found no exits. This place appears to be the very end of the labyrinth, an isolated boss room. More importantly, she explains that although there is an overwhelming amount of water energy present, she cannot control any of it despite being a water spirit. Eugene looks around, realizing this must be what Romary saw deep underground. He asks Miriam why she cannot control it. Miriam explains that in principle, she can only manipulate the blood of the dead. In other words, the owner of this blood is still alive. Suddenly, the Minotaur emerges once again from the water. Eugene orders Miriam to search for any possible opening while he confronts the beast head-on. Glancing at Frederick, he realizes that since he is still unable to move, the first priority is immobilizing the monster. Eugene charges forward, striking the Minotaur, but the instant his sword connects, it shatters. The enraged beast retaliates. Eugene barely dodges the attack and stares at his broken blade. A normal sword cannot even scratch it. In that case, he will have to make do. He forges a sword from his own power and attacks again, but upon impact, he realizes the creature's body is unnaturally shallow. The Minotaur smashes Eugene aside, sending him crashing into the wall. It strikes him again, mercilessly. As Romari continues healing Frederick, she watches Eugene being overwhelmed and desperately urges Frederick to wake up, shouting that his close friend is in danger. Eugene staggers under the blows, realizing Romari was right. This advanced monster exists on an entirely different level. The Minotaur then prepares an attack aimed directly at Frederick and the others. Eugene freezes in shock, then instantly appears in front of them, shielding them with his body. He takes the blow head-on and is grievously injured. As pain floods his senses, he thinks that powerlessness is a sensation he knows all too well, etched into him over decades. Yet somehow, it feels far more painful now. The Minotaur raises its weapon once more and delivers a final, crushing strike. Eugene collapses to the ground. At that very moment, Frederick regains consciousness and his eyes widen in horror as he sees Eugene lying motionless before him. Romari stares at Eugene in shock, her mind reeling. She had warned him so many times. Even if he was a vampire, there was no way he could defeat something like that. Just then, the beast lunges at her. Is she really going to die like this? The thought flashes through her mind as despair creeps in. Just as hope is about to slip away, Frederick struggles to his feet and calls out to Eugene. He looks at him grimly, saying that in the end, he was dragged into all of this because of him. Romari desperately tells him to run, to get away while he still can, but Frederick shakes his head and refuses. He tells her everything happened because he was weak. In his heart, he thinks their relationship could have ended as nothing more than a fleeting encounter. Yet he was instantly drawn to Eugene's strength, his unwavering resolve. He didn't want that connection to fade. He wanted to become someone strong enough to stand beside him. But now, it's all over. Frederick suddenly grabs Romari and hurls her backward just as the attack crashes down. He takes the blow head-on. Seeing this, Eugene's fury erupts. His expression turns ice cold as he unleashes his true form. A terrifying surge of energy explodes outward, shaking the ground itself. In an instant, Eugene charges the beast and strikes. Romari stares in disbelief. What happened to his body? The beast retaliates, but Eugene dodges effortlessly and smashes it back, dealing massive damage. Yet in the next moment, the creature's wounds knit together instantly. Romari realizes that even though it is an advanced monster, its recovery speed is abnormal, almost as if it is constantly receiving healing magic. As the massive eye opens fully, the pool of blood beneath it rapidly shrinks, and its fatal wounds vanish without a trace. Eugene slams into the wall and begins destroying the eyes one by one, shattering them. Romari's thoughts race, just as she suspected. The true master of this labyrinth was never the Minotaur. The very environment itself was designed to keep humans alive for extended periods along with the hundreds of missing people who vanished here. A horrifying realization dawns on her. Was this entire labyrinth the god they were offering sacrifices to? While Eugene battles the monster inside, Lugates and his team stand outside. They open the door, and Lugates grins darkly. Since they've opened the eyes, he thinks, it's finally time for them to answer his prayers. Inside the chamber, the eye merges fully with the monster, which then unleashes its true form. With a deafening crash, it breaks through the roof and escapes the dungeon. Romari's face drains of color. There's a civilian village right outside. Miriam returns, calling out that she has found the exit only to freeze when she sees the massive hole in the ceiling. What happened here? The structure begins to collapse. Miriam rushes towards Eugene, urgently telling him they have to leave now. Eugene stands silently before Frederick's lifeless body. Romari watches in shock. Is a vampire mourning the death of a mere human? Eugene feels genuine remorse for Frederick. Romari's thoughts tremble as she remembers hearing Eugene's true identity. He had lived while posing as a knight, yet she had never once seen a vampire form such a bond with a human, especially one of such noble blood. Then Eugene bends down and bites Frederick on the neck. The unholy beast charges toward the city, releasing a furious earth-shaking roar. From inside, Romari asks Eugene if he has ever heard of origin vampires. Origin refers to the highest-ranking and most noble aristocrats within the vampire race. She admits that she hadn't realized it when she first met him, but seeing him fully awakened now, she understands he carries the bloodline of an origin vampire. There is one more thing she must tell him. An origin can revive someone who has not been dead for long and turn them into one of its kin. Eugene is stunned. Romari asks if he knows how kin are created. His thoughts drift as memory surfaces, biting the back of the neck, injecting blood through the fangs. However, most minds cannot endure it. He tells her he had no choice in the past but to treat them as disposable waste. She tells him that is normal for ordinary humans, But Frederick is different. As a knight, his mental strength is exceptional. If someone like him accepts an origin's blood, their sense of self will not collapse. They retain their memories, their will, and all the abilities they possessed as a human. The problem is this. Frederick's pride as a knight runs deep. He may consider a forcibly granted vampire life an unforgivable insult. There is a real chance he will attack. Eugene looks down at Frederick's body. He has never even told him what he truly is. There is no way to know how Frederick views vampires. But still, if there is any other option, there isn't. Eugene lowers his head and bites Frederick's neck. It looks like the only way is to ask him directly. In the next instant, Eugene freezes. The rite of succession begins. Under the blood ritual, a kin is the property of their sovereign. The kin's soul binds itself completely to its origin, and all of the kin's power is returned to the sovereign. Only after this transfer does the succession finally conclude. Power erupts violently, surging in every direction. A beam of radiant light shoots straight into the sky. At the same time, the village descends into absolute chaos. The monstrous beast storms through the streets, devouring people mercilessly, one after another. Screams echo endlessly as despair spreads like wildfire. Lugatz gazes upon the trembling city, a twisted smile forming on his face. It's finally here. This is the moment to receive the reward for offering a sacrifice to the labyrinth. He knows the humans will never realize the truth, that the entire disaster is nothing more than a rigged game between the labyrinth and himself. At the peak of their despair, he will appear. He will defeat the beast. That is the price of the contract he gained by offering a sacrifice. Die more. Despair deeper. Just as the beast is about to annihilate another group, a figure suddenly descends from above. Eugene appears. With a single overwhelming strike, he slams the beast into the ground. He seizes it and kills it instantly. Lugatz's expression shatters. Why is he here? He had clearly offered Eugene as the final sacrifice. His death should have been inevitable. So, how did he return alive and completely unharmed? As Lugatz struggles to analyze the situation, Eugene calmly speaks. He remarks that Lugatz looks quite pleased. He asks whether Lord Jevon knows about the chaos he has created. Then Eugene dismisses the thought entirely. It doesn't matter anymore. Lugatz will pay for his sins right here. Before Lugatz can react, a presence materializes behind him. Frederick strikes. Lugatz turns in disbelief, as Frederick looks at him and asks whether he missed him. Now it is Frederick's turn to repay the humiliation from the tournament. He tells Lugatz to prepare himself. Once again, Eugene faces the beast head-on and launches into battle. He unleashes a powerful strike, smashing it into the monster. The people watching erupt into cheers, their fear turning into hope. Voices rise one after another praising him, applauding him. Suddenly, someone shouts that he is the Messiah. The crowd falls silent for a split second before erupting in shock. The person insists that Eugene was sent down from the heavens to save them, that the prophecy was never a rumor, but the truth all along. Eugene prepares another attack. With overwhelming force, he strikes the beast and delivers the finishing blow. The monster crashes to the ground and finally dies. At the same time, Lugatz collapses. Seeing his downfall, his followers panic and flee in every direction. Lugatz screams that he has inherited the power of God, that he will become the god of the new era. He attempts to attack Frederick, but Frederick blocks him effortlessly and asks where the monstrous strength Lugatz displayed earlier has gone. Lugatz stares at him in disbelief. Then Eugene appears. Frederick turns and asks Eugene for orders. Eugene coldly commands him to kill them all without leaving a single one behind. Hearing this, Lugatz runs for his life, screaming that this cannot be happening. But in the next instant, Frederick appears in front of him and calmly asks where he thinks he is rushing off to. Facing Frederick's overwhelming strength, Lugatz mutters that neither he nor Eugene are normal. When the nightmare of that single night finally ends, news of Lugatz's atrocities spreads throughout Evergrow territory. Eugene becomes the hero who saved the land. Flowers are scattered wherever he goes, and people worship him with reverence. But Eugene does not care. The simple fact that Frederick returned alive is more than enough for him. Later inside a bar, Miriam bursts into tears and clings to Frederick, asking if he knows how worried she was. Frederick looks confused and asks Eugene what exactly she is. Eugene tells him that she is the thing that keeps following him around. Miriam introduces herself once again. Eugene grabs her and complains that she talks too much and is annoying, though admittedly useful in her own way. Normally humans cannot see her, but because they have stayed close to him, they have begun to perceive her, especially Frederick, now that he has become his kin. Eugene then tells Frederick that from now on, he must only drink animal blood. Frederick looks at his hand and mutters about life as a vampire. He asks if he has to avoid sunlight as well. Miriam agrees, but Frederick immediately walks toward the sunlight to test it. Eugene freezes in shock as Frederick steps into the light completely unharmed. Frederick says he feels perfectly fine. Romari explains that Eugene is an origin. Burning in sunlight only applies to ordinary vampires. An origin stands at the pinnacle of the vampire race, and daylight poses no threat to them. Since Frederick is an origin's kin, he is naturally unaffected. Eugene removes his armor and stares in disbelief. Frederick is completely fine. Then why had he suffered all this time? Frederick suddenly hugs him and says that now he finally understands why Eugene always wore a hat under the sun and rejected every sparring request. Eugene replies that that was the best he could do. Frederick smiles and says he looks forward to everything from now on. He tries to call Eugene by name, but cannot. Romari explains that because of their bond, he can no longer speak Eugene's name aloud. He must call him master. Frederick immediately objects, saying there was never such a rule. Before becoming kin, they were inseparable friends. Eugene looks at him and recalls the past. He tells Frederick that he is no longer human. Saving him was the best option at the time, but from now on his life will be filled with restrictions and danger, to the point where dying might have been less cruel. If Frederick feels betrayed, he does not have to follow him. Saving him was nothing more than a whim. Frederick says that is a hurtful thing to say to a friend. He stands up and declares that human or not does not matter. What matters is that he likes Eugene, and his life was saved by him. Does Eugene think he is the kind of person who would not repay such a debt? He swears that he will follow Eugene for the rest of his life. Eugene looks at him and smiles faintly, wondering if he should stitch that mouth shut later. Frederick then asks about Partek and Laban. Eugene replies that he secretly gave them a task and wonders whether they handled it properly. A letter of thanks was sent to Eugene from St. Lagran Monastery. In it, they expressed their gratitude, stating that thanks to Lord Eugene's intervention, they had been able to root out a heretical faction hidden within the monastery. The Templars had been illegally using half-demon magic stones to raid labyrinths, and through that process they had steadily expanded their heretical group. Eugene had realized something was amiss and dispatched mercenaries to arrest them. Eugene remarked that, as far as he knew, Templars were people who acted strictly according to the will of the gods. The fact that they had voluntarily joined labyrinth subjugations was therefore highly suspicious, especially when unsettling rumors about the end times were already spreading throughout the territory. He wondered aloud what sort of divine will could possibly compel them to participate in such expeditions. Hearing this, Jevon remained silent for a moment before responding. He explained that St. Lagran Monastery was a place sponsored by the Evergrow family and it had always been operated with utmost devotion. Had such a blasphemous faction gone unnoticed until the very end, the honor of their family would have been severely tarnished. Jevon added that he was glad he could be of help and stated that they should be on their way. Just as they were about to leave, Jevon congratulated Eugene on Frederick's safe return. The two of them briefly turned their gaze toward Frederick before departing. Afterward, everyone threw a lively party to celebrate Frederick's return, telling him they had truly believed he would never come back alive. Frederick replied that being able to return with all his limbs intact was largely thanks to his master's help. One of the mercenaries jokingly asked whether he had now decided to serve Eugene as his master for good. Frederick drank down a jug of beer, grimacing as he did. It tasted awful. He really had become accustomed to a vampire's tongue. Just then, Laban pointed out that Frederick's eye color looked different from before and asked whether something had happened inside the labyrinth. Frederick immediately began teasing him instead, asking if he was sure Partek hadn't exaggerated his own contribution. Laughter erupted among the group. Partek then turned to Eugene and remarked that, regardless, the fact that Eugene had managed to cover up the truth surrounding the monastery was truly astonishing. When he had reported it, even Lord Jevon had looked visibly shocked. Eugene asked him whether he truly believed the monastery had sent that letter out of pure gratitude. Partek stiffened in surprise as Eugene calmly explained that, to be precise, he had allowed things to unfold that way. He had never ordered them to loot the monastery completely. If they had stripped it bare and stained the Evergrow family's honor, the family would have been forced to dig deeper and eventually uncover the fact that Eugene himself had interfered with the monastery. However, by leaving behind a small opening from the family's perspective, they only needed to sever ties with a single man. Partek immediately understood the situation. Eugene concluded that it looked like they would need to leave the territory that very night, and they would have to do so quietly. Later, as Eugene and the others were departing, they realized they were being followed by royal knights. One of the knights narrowed his eyes at Eugene, recognizing a man riding a black horse, wrapped in a black leather robe. There was no doubt it was Eugene. No matter the circumstances, Sir Lugates had been a criminal, but he was still a territory knight whom Lord Jevon had cherished deeply. Because Frederick had killed him, Jevon had been unable to personally pass judgment, a fact he mourned greatly. To him, it was no different from having his honor stained, and for that responsibility the knight swore he would scar that pretty face of Eugene's. In the next instant, Eugene appeared behind him and unleashed a powerful slash, commanding them to stop, right there. The mercenaries immediately surrounded the knights, and Frederick casually told them to try escaping if they could. One by one, the knights were overwhelmed, bound, and forced to the ground. Frederick looked at Eugene with genuine admiration and asked when he had learned such swordsmanship. Eugene replied that he had learned it from Frederick himself, thinking that this answer wasn't entirely wrong. The moment he had injected his fangs into Frederick's body, all the skills and experiences Frederick had accumulated had been transmitted into his mind. At the same time, Eugene recalled the mysterious voice that had whispered into his ear. Whose voice had that been? He wondered if it was something bestowed from the heavens. One of the captured knights spat at him, accusing Eugene of shamelessness after insulting Lord Jevon. He sneered that Eugene hadn't even appreciated the favor of being recommended as a territory knight. He claimed Eugene had nearly died in the dungeon due to his own lack of skill, and was now shifting the blame onto Sir Lugatus. Eugene glared at them coldly and declared that they had all come prepared to die. He said he would allow just one of them to live and return with the message. Frederick interrupted with a suggestion, asking how about treating them as prisoners instead. Eugene questioned the idea, but Frederick explained that even among enemies, honoring the courage of those who had fought bravely was an old custom. More importantly, demanding ransom would bring in money. Eugene looked at the knights once more and said that as long as their limbs remained intact, that was acceptable. He then proceeded to beat them mercilessly. Later, the royal knights nervously asked Eugene whether it was truly acceptable for them to remain there. Priscilla told Eugene not to worry, assuring him that they could easily cover lodging costs of that level. Eugene replied that they would soon receive their ransom from Lord Jevon anyway. He then asked Priscilla to repair his armor. She examined it closely, stunned. They had once claimed that not even a dragon's tooth could pierce it, yet it had been effortlessly punctured by a single skewer. She promised to reinforce it and make it far sturdier. While she was at it, Eugene asked her to make a new set of armor for Frederick as well. Frederick's face immediately lit up, asking if his too, and Eugene agreed, saying he should at least maintain that level of dignity for him. Priscilla smiled inwardly, thinking she truly had a good eye for people. Eugene always brought in plenty of valuable byproducts, and a few suits of armor were nothing in comparison. With skills like his, she politely asked whether he had already decided on his next destination. Eugene replied that for the time being, he planned to focus on clearing advanced dungeon stones. Priscilla then mentioned that she knew of a gambling dungeon and asked what he thought. Kevin slammed his hand down on the table, in frustration, cursing under his breath. This guy, that guy, none of them were of any use. Their so-called knights couldn't even deal with a single opponent, and ended up getting captured like helpless prisoners. He clenched his teeth as Eugene's image surfaced in his mind. He had known Eugene was stronger than Mugate's, but he never imagined the gap was this vast. Should he really leave things as they were? The man who had dared to kill one of his territory's knights, just let him walk away? As his gaze wandered over the map spread before him, something suddenly caught his attention. He froze, then leaned closer. Come to think of it, Eugene had come through an introduction from the Pylon Merchant Guild. That meant his next destination would almost certainly be a demonic realm contracted to the same guild. There was only one such place still under their contract. The Philia Ruins, located on the Carlsbagen Peninsula. Eugene and the others were traveling by boat when Frederick spoke up, mentioning that the Carlsbagen Peninsula was said to have barely any influence from the Kieler Central Church. The Marquis who had once unified the peninsula had been a fanatic ruler, and rumors claimed he fell from power after governing tyrannically. Once the Marquis collapsed, even the Bishop of Carlsbagen fled, losing all authority and trust. That's good, Eugene replied calmly. Just then, Mirin called out to him, informing him that there was a mage on board who was on the verge of dying. Nearby, Romari was suffering terribly from seasickness, practically vomiting her lungs out. Frederick walked over to her and asked bluntly if her condition was that bad, why she had chosen to come along at all. Romari weakly replied that she had believed the magic of their Blood Shadow school would be of great assistance to someone of noble origin. Frederick pressed her for the real reason. After a brief pause, she admitted that their school required vast quantities of byproducts from intermediate to advanced monsters to create chimeras. Recreating and researching their own chimeras was the ultimate mission and purpose of their school. Frederick relayed her words to Eugene, adding that she was afraid of being thrown away when she was no longer useful. Romari suddenly spoke again, saying that if they were talking about purpose, then spirits were no different. Spirits that entered contracts with vampires were also chasing loot. That remark immediately sparked a heated argument between Miriam and Romari. Frederick, watching the two bicker, turned to Eugene and remarked that everyone had their own reasons for sticking together. Didn't that mean they all recognized just how incredible Eugene was? Even the mercenaries had likely decided to follow him after witnessing his strength. After a moment, Frederick asked Eugene what his goal truly was. He didn't think he had ever heard him speak about it seriously. Eugene fell silent, his thoughts turning inward. He had only two goals: memories and revenge. To recover all his lost memories and uncover what kind of existence he had once been, and to ensure he would never die a miserable death like he had in his past life. To accomplish that, he had to grow stronger, especially through the use of red magic stones. The holy knights who had killed him before, along with the Keeler Kingdom's central church, continued to persecute vampires relentlessly. He could not afford to lower his guard, not even for a moment. Frederick noticed the tension in Eugene's expression and waved it off, saying he didn't have to answer if he didn't want to. Honestly, he didn't care what Eugene's goal was. Either way, he was living a new life thanks to him. Interesting things were bound to happen from now on, and he was genuinely looking forward to it. Eugene asked whether Frederick didn't want to raise his status. Frederick laughed and replied that this was rising in status, traveling freely while basking in sunlight. That alone was incredible. If he had died back then, he would never have experienced such a brilliant voyage. He thanked Eugene once again and declared that no matter where he went or what awaited them, he would always follow him. Just then, Miriam chimed in, saying that while she liked gold coins too, being by Eugene's side was far better. Still, she added cheerfully, they would continue collecting gold and eventually pile it up high enough to build a golden castle. The others eagerly agreed. Eugene watched them and thought that it seemed he would have many troublesome companions to look after. Strangely enough, the thought didn't feel unpleasant at all. A faint smile tugged at his lips. At Port City Mofern, on the Karlsbacken Peninsula, Baron, the leader of the mercenary group assigned to guide them, greeted Eugene. He explained that he had been sent to escort him after being introduced by the branch manager of the Pylon Merchant Guild. He added that their schedule was tight and that they would depart immediately. Eugene agreed. As they walked, Baron explained that the barony of Baelgallen was one of the few regions on the peninsula where a demonic realm was still properly managed. However, for the past few months, they hadn't been able to take down even a single intermediate monster. Eugene asked if it was because of a wyvern. Baron nodded, confirming that it was an extremely cunning creature that attacked at all hours, repeatedly interfering with subjugation efforts. As expected of an advanced monster, Eugene thought, this might be a chance to obtain a red magic stone. Veron added that if they happened to encounter bandits along the way, it would be best to simply pay an appropriate toll. Eugene asked what a wyvern had to do with bandits. Veron hesitated. At first glance, Eugene looked like a pampered noble. If he were killed by bandits before reaching their destination, it would be disastrous. Frederick, the knight, clearly looked strong, but Eugene appeared to be the typical knight who relied on chivalry and reputation to build fame. Vron finally replied that his objective was monster subjugation, not dealing with bandits. At that moment, Eugene sensed something wrong, a subtle distortion in the air. He calmly asked for a spear. Frederick handed one to him without hesitation. Veron's eyes whitened as Eugene hurled the spear forward in a blur of motion, instantly killing a hidden bandit. Startled shouts rang out as the rest of the bandits revealed themselves, launching an ambush. Veron was stunned. How did he notice them? Eugene ordered him not to break formation and to guard the carriage, stating that he would deal with them himself. Veron hurriedly warned him to pay the toll instead, fearing he would get himself killed. Eugene merely glanced back and told him that he worried too much. He then told Frederick to move. As the tension surged, Veron felt a chill crawl up his spine. From the very beginning, he had a bad feeling about this man, and now he understood why.